First story. My entitled stepson had too much undeserving independence, which was unfair to my daughter. So I demanded that he follow the same rules as her. Cut ties with his friends because she doesn't like them, and quit his job, as I'm the man of his house now. He refused, so I kicked him out of the home. Now everything I built has collapsed, and everyone has abandoned me. I 40M married my wife 39F just over a month ago. It was a relatively quick relationship. We met online during the pandemic, visited each other across cities for about a year, and then she moved into my home with her son 16M. I have a daughter around the same age from my previous marriage. My wife's ex passed away years ago in a tragic incident, so her son has only had her for most of his life. Here's the thing, I'm pretty structured about how I run my house. Always have been. My daughter has a curfew, helps out with the house, and checks in with me if she's going to be late or hang out with friends. I'm not overbearing, I just believe in respect, rules, and keeping things clear. My wife seemed on board with that during our relationship. We talked about parenting differences, and I told her I expected consistency in the house. She said her son was independent, but respectful. That was an understatement. From the moment they moved in, there was a shift. Her son is polite on the surface, but the guy does whatever he wants. Doesn't take money from anyone. He does freelance work, photography, design gigs, editing, that sort of thing. He's got actual contracts with micro-influencers and small businesses, apparently. He's always working on something. It sounds productive, but in practice, it means he's out whenever he wants, takes phone calls during meals, and lives by his own schedule. At first, I didn't say anything. It was the honeymoon phase. He'd come in late sometimes, but I gave it a pass. But then I noticed my daughter getting uncomfortable around him. Not scared, just annoyed. She said he was always hanging around kids. She didn't like guys with weird attitudes and wannabe creative types who dressed like they were in a band 24/7. She made a comment that one of them had been suspended for drugs the year before. So I sat him down. I said, "Look, I know you're used to a different environment, but this is my house. If you're going to hang out with people like that, I need to know what's going on." He didn't argue, didn't even speak back. Just sat there with that fake smile attitude and said, "Okay." That's what got me the most, the surface level respect. But underneath, he wasn't adjusting. He wasn't integrating. He was treating this place like a dorm room. Meanwhile, I had to practically beg my daughter to stay civil around him. They clashed, often small, sarcastic jabs. He never raised his voice, but he had this way of making her feel dumb during arguments. I tried to mediate, but it felt like he was always playing innocent. My wife kept brushing it off as, "He's just like his dad, headstrong and quiet." I started to feel like I had a stranger living in my house. One who smiled and nodded, but didn't really give a damn about how we lived. Then we had the first big issue. He came home after 11 p.m. on a weekday. That's a hard rule in my house, unless there's prior notice. I asked where he was, and he said he had a gig, some last-minute photo shoot a few towns over. I said, "I get that, but next time, you need to let us know. That's not how things work here." He said, "I didn't want to miss the opportunity. And I didn't think I needed to ask permission to work." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, like I was being unreasonable. I reminded him again, rules are rules. He said, "Got it," but nothing changed. The following week, same thing. Out late, texting during dinner, never interacting unless spoken to. My daughter started spending more time in her room. I told my wife this wasn't working. She said we needed time. I asked, "Why does your son act like we're intruding on his house?" She didn't have an answer. Fast forward to last week, and things hit a boiling point. He came home around midnight. This time, I was waiting. I wasn't going to keep repeating myself. I said, "You know the rules. I don't care what job you had, this is my house. You don't just roll in whenever." He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I told you before, I'm working. If I'm shooting, I can't walk out halfway to make it back by 10. I said, "This is still my house, and the rules apply to everyone. If my daughter can respect them, so can you." He said, "She lives here. I'm just staying here." That's when I got pissed. You do live here, and if you can't follow the rules, maybe you shouldn't. He paused and said, "Is that what you want?" Calm. Like he was daring me to say it. I didn't back down. "Maybe I need to think about some things." He leant against the counter, looked at me, and said, "Like what?" "I'll admit it, I lost it." I said, "Like kick you out." My wife came downstairs when she heard us. She tried to step between us and started begging, saying, "Please, let's talk. Let's sit down." He didn't budge. He just stood there and waited. I repeated myself. If you can't respect this house, get out. Then he turned to my wife and asked, "Do you have anything to say about this?" That hurt her. I could tell. She looked torn. She didn't want to pick sides. She just said, "Please, don't do this. Just calm down." He didn't say another word. He just nodded once, went upstairs, and locked his door. A couple of hours later, I heard him moving around. I figured he'd calm down and come talk. But when I went upstairs, his room was mostly packed. He called a cab from his phone. When I asked him to stop, to not be ridiculous, he looked me in the eye and said, "Think twice before you speak." And then he left. My wife broke down the second the door closed. She tried calling him and texting him. No answer. She blamed me instantly, saying I escalated it. I said he made the choice to leave. She said he only left because he knew I wouldn't back down, and he refused to be controlled. I said it wasn't control, it was respect. If he was going to live here, he should live with us, not separately like some guest who reports to no one. She barely spoke to me the rest of the night. The next day, she stayed in bed until the afternoon. When she finally got a call, she ran out to the porch to answer it. Afterwards, she told me he wasn't coming back. He'd already gone back to their old city. Apparently, he called in a favor from some older friend who booked the ticket for him. No clue how he passed ID checks, or if someone met him there. I think he's more resourceful than I realized. He said he'd be staying with a friend until he could rent a place. He fully intends to finish school online or transfer. He told her not to worry about him. He told her not to try to drag him back into a situation where someone wants to treat him like a kid just because they have a ring on their finger. My wife cried until she could barely breathe. I told her we could try to talk to him peacefully and set boundaries that still allowed flexibility. She asked why I couldn't have done that in the first place. I said because he walks around like the rules are optional, if he's busy doing something he thinks is important. She said, maybe they are optional if he's actually working and not screwing around. We argued again. She said I had an ego problem and was treating him like I needed to break him in like a new recruit. I told her it was unfair that my daughter has rules, but he gets a pass because he's talented and independent. I said this house can't have two systems. If he's family, he follows the family rules. If he's a guest, then fine, he can leave. So he left. It's been a week. My daughter is quieter because she knows her stepbrother leaving put a crack in this marriage. She asked me once if I regretted it. I told her no. She nodded but didn't look convinced. My wife still sleeps in our bed, but we barely talk. Sometimes she works with headphones on all evening. She's still in contact with him. She doesn't tell me much, just that he's fine. She hasn't gone to see him yet, but I can tell she wants to. When I tried to talk about how we move forward, she said she doesn't even know if we have the same definition of family. I've tried explaining to her that I never asked him to stop working. I only asked him to respect the house and not act like he's above basic structure. I didn't like that he had no interest in being part of this home, not helping out, not having real conversations, not engaging like he was part of the same household. He was living parallel to us, not with us. I thought kicking him out would make him realize he couldn't just walk all over boundaries. Instead, he left like it was a relief. She keeps saying, he's been independent since he was 13 because he had to be, and I get that. But being independent doesn't mean no accountability. And I won't run a house where my own kid sees someone else doing whatever they want without consequences. Now the problem is my wife looks at me differently. She hasn't said divorce, but I can feel something pulling away. She told me I don't understand what it's like to raise a kid alone after losing a partner. I told her I don't understand why independence means zero compromise. She said, you didn't try to understand him. You tried to fit him into your system. I said, yes, because he moved into my home. She went silent for a long time and then said, that's the difference. You always say you're home. I don't think I'm wrong for expecting rules. I don't think I'm wrong for not liking how he floated above everything like he was here on his own terms, and we were just temporary. I don't think it's unreasonable to not want some freelance teen coming and going at midnight because he feels his schedule outranks mine. But I can admit, I didn't expect him to actually leave and not look back. Maybe I thought he'd push back, argue, and then compromise. Instead, he walked out like he'd planned for this situation long ago, as if he never fully accepted moving in. Now my wife barely laughs, avoids eye contact when we talk, and gently moves conversations away from parenting. I feel like I'm waiting for something. Either he comes back, Or she decides she can't be married to someone he won't return to live with. I'm not remorseful about what I said, but I'm unsure how this affects everything long term. I still believe if you're under my roof, you follow basic rules. I just figured marriage meant unity in that belief. I didn't realize she saw her son as someone who'd already earned the right to never have someone else set rules for him. So now I'm stuck between feeling justified and watching my marriage slip. Ada? Comments. Comment 1. Man, you talk like a boss, not a parent. I get them, my house, my rules logic to an extent. But you're treating a grieving kid who's been self-sufficient since 13 as if he's some brat crashing on your couch. You married his mother. That means you married into her family. You didn't adopt a new tenant. You didn't like that he wasn't bending to your system. But you made zero effort to understand his world. He's been working legit jobs, probably helping his mom emotionally and financially for years. And now suddenly he has to play house with your daughter and follow your calendar like he's grounded. That's tone deaf. And let's talk about your daughter. She didn't like the guys he hung out with. Cool. But did they ever do anything to her? Or was this just judgment and teen drama you took at face value? You're protecting her. But from what? Because it sounds like her dislike gave you permission to double down on control. You didn't compromise. You drew a line, dared him to cross it, then acted surprised when he walked away. He's 16 and still walked out cleaner than most grown men. That tells me he wasn't the immature one here. Comment 2. YTA. You never accepted him as part of the family. From day one, you saw him as a problem to manage, not a person to understand. The fact that you repeatedly called it your house and expected him to fold into your rules with no negotiation just shows that you didn't see this as a shared home. You married his mom and expected him to adapt, no matter how that affected him. This kid wasn't just defying rules for fun, he was working. You treated a professional obligation like it was some excuse to sneak out. That's insulting. You didn't even try to ask, how can we make this work for everyone? You just laid down laws and expected him to salute. Also, let's be real. You resented him. That came through in every line. The way you talked about him not needing your money. The sarcasm about sitcom kids. The fact that you say he had a fake attitude because he didn't argue. You were looking for a reason to boot him. He walked out with his head high because he knew exactly what this was. He knew this wasn't going to get better. And honestly, he was right. Comment 3. YTA. This post read like someone trying to justify the fact they wanted the stepson gone from the start. You didn't like his independence. You didn't like his silence. You didn't like that he didn't ask you for things. Your daughter complained, and you clung to that as validation that he was troubled without any real evidence. You tried to break him down to your structure instead of trying to understand the system he was already living by. You treated emotional distance as defiance, and when he didn't grovel, you took it as disrespect. And let's be clear, you escalated. He never yelled. He never cursed. He didn't slam doors or get violent. You're the adult, and you acted like the teenager. The worst part? You showed your wife that she can't trust you with her child. That's a wound marriages don't always come back from. You didn't lose a power struggle, you lost trust. YTA. And you don't even seem sorry. Update. First off, for everyone who commented on the original post, I get that this subreddit tends to lean heavily on calling people controlling, narcissistic, toxic, etc. But most of you missed the point. You painted this like I was on a power trip or trying to dominate someone else's kid. That's not what happened. I set expectations. He didn't follow them. That's it. So here's where we are now. He's living with a guy named Jonah, some mid-30s photographer he met through one of those small shoots he worked on last year. The guy owns a small studio out in their old city. I guess he's letting him stay in the back apartment they usually rent out to interns. According to my wife, it's a mentorship situation. She says he's helping out at the studio, learning the business side of things. And yeah, she's still talking to him behind my back. I only found out about the money because of a bank notification. Joint account. She sent him $800 last week labeled equipment plus groceries. When I asked her why she was sneaking around, she got defensive. He said he has bills now and needed a new lens to keep working. I said, thought he was independent, thought he didn't need parents anymore. Her response, he doesn't need a father figure who treats him like a threat. That was the beginning of another argument. She accused me of pushing him out. I told her again I didn't throw him out randomly. I gave him a choice. Follow the house or leave. He left. She doesn't see it that way. She thinks I cornered him into walking. Says I challenged him to prove his independence. and then acted shocked when he did. What really messed things up, though, is how this is affecting my daughter. She's always been close to me. We've had our bumps like any parent and teen, but we talk. Lately, though, she's gotten colder, more passive-aggressive. 2 nights ago, she yelled at my wife during dinner, said, "Why are you still here if all you care about is your perfect son who hates us?" My wife broke down crying in front of both of us. I told my daughter that was out of line, but I also didn't stop her. I think she said what I've been thinking. My wife and I are supposed to be a team, but she's never held her son accountable. Now she's saying she might go stay with her sister for a while to clear her head. She hasn't left yet, but the bags are halfway packed in her mind. She says she feels like she's living with strangers. I told her that's rich, coming from someone who's funding her son's new life while treating this house like a prison. And before anyone says I'm being cruel or heartless again, let's clear something up. He claimed he was being treated unfairly, that he was expected to follow rules he didn't agree with. He also claimed to be independent. So why is he taking money now? Why is he depending on his mom to buy him camera lenses and groceries if he can live on his own and work? And don't come at me with, he's only 16, he needs support. That wasn't the tune when you were cheering him on for walking out. Either he's a grown, mature freelancer who gets to come and go at midnight, or he's a kid who needs a support system. Pick one. Another thing, one of the commenters in the original post said something like, "He probably left because you made him feel unsafe." That's bullshit. He wasn't scared. He stared me down and dared me to say it. If I'd said nothing, he would have kept going out late, ignoring curfew, doing whatever he wanted. He called the bluff, and I let him. He made the choice. Also, someone mentioned he should have reported me for kicking out a minor. First, he didn't. He could have. Second, he knew what would happen if he did. People would have started asking questions. CPS would have shown up. Maybe they would have even tried to push him back here. But he didn't want that. He knew he wasn't being abused or neglected. He was being asked to follow rules he didn't like. So he left, and now he's getting sympathy for it while still cashing in support money from my wife. Here's another thing you all ignored: theft. Before he left, some of my daughter's earbuds and portable speaker went missing. She asked him about it once, and he said she probably misplaced them. I didn't push it because there was no proof, and I didn't want to start something bigger than it was. But I'll admit now I think he took them. And if I'd gone through his bags, maybe we'd know. But I didn't. I let him walk. I didn't make it ugly. I let it slide. Everyone here talks about him being the bigger person for leaving quietly. Guess what? I was the bigger person by not pressing that theft issue. But all of that's ignored because Reddit loves the cold stepdad villain narrative. You want me to be some cartoon control freak because it fits the story better. But real life isn't black and white. I've never hit this kid. Never screamed in his face. Never insulted his father. Never tried to stop him from working or having friends. I just asked for respect and equal treatment for the 2 kids under my roof. If that makes me the bad guy, fine. But I'm not going to rewrite the past to make this easier on everyone else. I gave him a fair shot. He chose to walk. Now my house is colder. My marriage is teetering. My daughter feels abandoned. And my wife is financially supporting someone who doesn't even want to be part of this family. But sure, let's all pile on the guy who expected structure. Whatever. I stand by it. Comments. Comment 1. Your wife failed her kid by not preparing either of you for the transition. Your stepson is clearly emotionally walled off and not great at handling authority. But you're the glue holding the dysfunction together. Let's be honest, you never wanted to bond with him. You wanted him to fit into your framework without friction. But he wasn't some blank slate. He had a life, a career, trauma, and a different way of navigating the world. You came in like a manager, not a father figure. And now you're shocked that people picked up on that. Also, your whole, if he's independent, why is he taking money, thing. Come on. Adults need help sometimes. 16-year-olds, even more so. Independence doesn't mean zero support, it means knowing when and how to ask for help. He's doing more adulting than most 25-year-olds. You're in damage control mode and blaming everyone but yourself. Your wife sees it. Your daughter sees it. The only one who doesn't is you. Comment 2. You keep repeating, rules are rules, but the reality is you use that phrase to mask the fact that you never liked him. From the jump, he was a threat to your routine. You couldn't control him the way you control your daughter, and instead of adjusting your approach, you made everything about dominance. Your wife sees it. Your daughter sees it. Hell, he saw it. That's why he didn't argue. He knew it wasn't a conversation. He knew you weren't looking for compromise, just obedience. And now you're pissed he's surviving without you. You're mad your wife is still helping him. You're mad Reddit didn't back you. You've built this world where being the man of the house means everyone bends to your method or gets out. If you really believed in family, you wouldn't be this obsessed with being right. Update. A few people asked for an update, so here it is. Things have continued to unravel, and at this point, I'm not even sure what's left of the family I thought we were building. My daughter no longer lives with me. About 2 weeks ago, she packed a few bags and went to live with her mom. She said she couldn't handle the tension anymore. She's not completely cut off, she texts me here and there. But she stopped calling me dad and started calling me my father when she talks to others. Her mother and I don't exactly have a friendly co-parenting dynamic, so this whole situation has made things worse between us two. Meanwhile, my wife and I are barely speaking. She still lives here, technically, but she sleeps in the guest room now. She told me that she thinks I wanted her son gone from the beginning, that I saw him as a threat to how I run my house. I tried to defend myself. I said I treated both kids the same. She called that a joke. She said I never once tried to understand her son, I just wanted him to comply. She brought up how I used to get quiet whenever he spoke about his work, how I'd changed the subject when he showed me his edits or clients, and how I never once asked him about his dad. At first, I thought it was just more emotional backlash, but then something else happened. Someone from a youth services department called her. Apparently, because her son is a minor and now staying with an unrelated adult, the mentor, there are protocols involved. We're not being charged or anything, but they asked questions: how things ended, whether we attempted reconciliation, whether he was safe, etc. It's not a criminal thing, but there's now an open case where they're reviewing whether the current arrangement is legally okay. The guy he's staying with, Jonah, has agreed to house him temporarily, and there's talk of him taking over guardianship until he turns 18. That hit her like a truck. She started crying mid-call. Afterwards, she accused me of breaking her son to the point where he'd rather get legal guardianship transferred than come back home. She asked, "Do you realize what that means? He's trying to replace his family." I told her that wasn't fair. I didn't force him out, I set a boundary. She snapped. "You didn't set a boundary. You made it clear he wasn't welcome unless he broke himself to fit you." Then came the ultimatum. She told me she'd been thinking about leaving for weeks. She said she stayed to see if I'd try to repair anything. She told me if I wanted this marriage to survive, I'd need to talk to her son. Apologize. Not about the rules, but about how I handled it. She told me, "This is the only way I stay." So I tried. I drove to Jonah's studio on a Saturday. I knew where it was, my wife had mentioned it a few times, and I found the rest online. I brought coffee and tried to rehearse what I'd say. I was going to tell him that I didn't mean to push him out, that I just wanted fairness in the house. I even planned to offer to set up new rules, with more flexibility for his work. He was outside unloading gear when I pulled up. I approached him and said, "Can we talk for a second?" He didn't answer, just stared. I said I wanted to make things right. That if he came home, we'd figure out a system that worked for everyone. I said I knew I came down too hard, but that I never meant to make him feel like he wasn't part of the family. He said, "You made it clear I wasn't family the night you told me to get out." I didn't know how to respond, so I just asked, "Would you be willing to come back, even just to talk through it at the house?" He said no. Then turned around and went back inside. That was it. I stayed in the car for a few minutes afterwards, hoping maybe he'd come back out. He didn't. I texted my wife that I tried. She didn't respond for hours. When she finally did, it just said, "He told me." Since then, things have only gotten colder. I found out she's been in contact with a divorce attorney. She hasn't filed yet, but I saw the email. She didn't try to hide it. When I asked if she was serious, she said, "You didn't lose him because of one night. You lost him because you made sure he knew he didn't belong here every day since we moved in." I told her I'm still the one holding this house together. I pay the bills. I took her and her son in. I've never asked for anything in return except respect. She said, "That's exactly the problem. You think love and parenting are transactions." I don't regret expecting rules. I don't regret drawing the line. What I regret is thinking this was ever going to be a real family. Because clearly, no one else ever treated it like one either. So now I'm in a house with no kids. My daughter won't come back until my wife is gone. My wife is halfway out the door herself. And her son. He's already got someone else willing to raise him. Someone who didn't ask him to earn his place. I'm the one who's still here. Still showing up. Still standing by what I believe. But everyone else, they walked away. So yeah, maybe I was the problem. Or maybe they just didn't want a home with boundaries. Either way, I'm done trying. Comments. Comment 1. You treated your wife like she brought baggage, not a son. That's the core of this. You married a woman who came with a teenager, and you expected him to slot into your system without resistance. When he didn't, instead of adjusting the system, you tried to push him out of it. Then you acted shocked when she chose her son over you. Of course she did. That's not disloyalty, it's being a mother. And what did you offer the kid when you tried to make things right? A chance to come back under your roof, under your terms, under your control. You didn't go to repair anything. You went to reclaim him like he was property that left without permission. This isn't a parenting failure, it's a partnership failure. You never wanted a family. You wanted a replica of your first setup, with 2 kids who acted like soldiers and a wife who stayed silent. And when it didn't happen, you blamed them for walking. Comment 2. You keep rewriting what happened so you can stay the righteous one. When your daughter left, you painted it like she couldn't handle tension, rather than seeing that she lost respect for your approach. When your wife pulled away, you turned her pain into her being emotional. When your stepson walked, you spun it into him being too proud to follow reasonable rules. Every time something happens, you edit your narrative so you're still the firm but fair guy holding it all together. Here's the truth. You don't want a family. You want order. You want quiet. You want confirmation that your system works. But families are messy, emotional, and irrational at times. They require compromise, not dominance. You don't bend. You enforce. You didn't lose this family because they were weak or rebellious. You lost them because you refused to meet them where they were. You stayed rigid. They moved on. Second story. I overheard my cheating husband tell my son that women are sensitive, and he needs to man up and ignore my sobbing. I, 29F, have been married to my husband, 32M, for 8 years. We got married just out of college and had our wonderful son nearly right away, 7M. He has always been a loving and supportive husband. I never had to work and have been a SAH mom for our boy. 13 years ago, before I met my husband, I lost my father to pancreatic cancer when I was only 16. It was very sudden and unexpected. With the trauma, I struggled a lot with mental health and depression for years afterwards. Meeting my husband was instrumental in healing. He knows this and was a large part of my journey. My son was told his grandfather died from illness, but not specifically cancer, because of his young age. Today, our son came home from school and told us at dinner that one of his classmates in the 2nd grade's grandmother was just diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and not expected to live much longer, and how upset his friend was because he and his grandma are close. I started crying and hugged my son and told him how sorry I was for his friend and how much he needed to be there and how awful what his friend must be going through and was about to go through. And I told him about my father, his grandfather's death. Naturally, my son started crying too. We were both just hugging and crying at the dinner table, while my husband kind of just stared at us and didn't say much, just kept eating. Afterwards, my husband took our son into the other room while I finished cleaning up after dinner. I assumed to comfort him in his own way, as our son was still upset. I walk over, and I hear my husband telling our son how he needs to man up for his friend, and that women are too sensitive, and I was overreacting and needed to get over my father's death already, since it's been over a decade. I was shocked, stunned, hurt. I entered the room while I was still processing what I'd heard, and of course my husband shut up. I ask him if I can talk to him privately for a minute. I tell him that I overheard what he said to our son. My husband says he's not sorry, that he's teaching our son to be a real man, and that he regrets allowing me to be stuck in my grief and not move on for so many years, and he wishes he'd said something sooner. He also said other hurtful things, that I coddle our son too much, and he should never have let me be an SAH mum for him, because he's growing up to be a big baby. I left without saying a word. Just took our son and left for my mum's house. I need time to think and cool down. Now my husband is blowing up my phone with calls and texts, saying I'm immature, that I'm proving his point, that real adults talk it out and move on, that they don't just throw a tantrum and run away. And he's beginning to get other friends and family involved. Ada for taking some space to work through my hurt, and the revival of the feelings of grief triggered by today's events. Or should I have just stayed there and worked things out with my husband? I do plan to go back, but I need some time. Comments. Comment 1. NTA. It sounds like your husband has some toxic and dangerously outdated ideas about emotions and who is allowed to show them. Men are not babies or lesser because they shed tears when something hurts. And you are not overreacting to hearing your son has a classmate going through so similar a grief to your own. Your husband thinks he has to bottle up his emotions to be strong, but that's only going to set him up for an unhealthy explosion at some point when his own repression boils over. If you want to keep the family together, then it is time to find a good therapist to help your husband come abreast of the current times and find a healthy way to deal with his emotions. Comment 2. NTA. The whole men don't cry misogynistic nonsense is so harmful and results in resentful, angry, emotionally unavailable men who can't express themselves. You didn't leave because you were upset about your dad, like hubby seems to think. You left because of your husband's terrible attitude. Having said that, are you stuck in your grief? While there's no set period of time for grief to heal, if it is still affecting daily life, not saying it is, you may wish to seek grief counseling. OP. I don't think so. I've been doing well for the last few years. I get sad at certain times: his birthday, parents' anniversary, Christmas, milestones for my son, etc. Times I wish he could have been there for. But I don't think that's unnatural. I was a little triggered tonight, but the circumstances were similar to mine, and so it felt more personal. Comment 3. I'm not going to say you're a complete but this is a mild because your son was telling you about something his friend is going through, and you made it about you and your bereavement. You started crying and projecting, identifying with the friend in the story more than listening to your son processing this information. Your son didn't need to be told about your father's illness and your grief in that moment, and you went overboard about telling a 7-year-old how much he needed to be there for his friend. There is a limit to how much a 7-year-old can support another child through grief and bereavement. Putting that on a kid's shoulders is too much. Your son literally ended up crying. I think you need grief counseling. Your father's death will always be an impactful, formative experience for you, but it shouldn't lead you to taking over moments with your son. My husband doesn't often talk about his late mother, but he's able to talk to our kids about death and bereavement and grief without making it all about him and his loss. My cousins lost their father through self-harm at tender ages, and they talk about self-harm prevention without crying and making it about them. Your husband sucks for his boys don't cry approach, insulting you, his misogyny, and being totally unfeeling towards something you are still debilitated by. But I can see his concern that you are still stopped in your tracks by your grief. Nobody is ever going to expect you to be singing and dancing over your father's death, but you should be able to comfort your son about his friend's loss without making it about you and crying. Update. Hi Reddit. A few days ago, I posted on this subreddit asking for advice. As was expected, some of you replied with lovely, helpful, and constructive comments, while others replied with cruel and unkind ones. Unfortunately, that's the internet for you. However, I did take some of your all's advice. First, I would like to address 3 recurring negative comments from my original post. 1, that I am stuck in my grief and need to move on. As far as I can tell, I'm really not. I haven't had any issues or even cried in years. It was only the similar circumstances that were brought up that brought me to tears that night. That I was unfairly putting my emotional problems on my son and made him cry. This is absolutely unfair. My son was not crying simply because I was. He was crying because of grief over what I had just shared about his grandfather, on top of feeling empathy for his friend. Perhaps the timing of this was wrong of me, but if I hadn't told him then, what was I going to say years later? What would be the right time to tell him the full story? That maybe I had been overparenting my son. I will address this further in my update. So on to the actual update. As I said in my original post, my son and I did go back to my husband the next day. He did not apologize or admit he was wrong. I said I was sorry for leaving in a state of emotion, and we agreed to just table what had happened and move on. I did bring up couples counseling for our communication, as some Redditors here had suggested. He was hostile to the idea, saying that maybe I needed therapy, but he didn't. After some arguing, he finally very reluctantly agreed, as long as I went to more therapy sessions than him. We scheduled our first appointment for in a couple of weeks, which was the earliest we could get in. While we've been in this state of waiting for that session to happen, I decided to take some more of Reddit's advice and try and get an impartial view of whether or not I was being a smothering parent, as my husband had accused me of. I went ahead and asked his parents and sister, who have seen us together, and they assured me I was a normal parent and not overcompensating or overprotective in any way more than anyone else. I was appreciative, but did want to get one last opinion that wasn't colored by any family bias. So today, I went to my husband's best friend of several years, 31M, and asked him. He was surprised since we aren't very close. We know each other, but haven't spent much time together. But he agreed with the others that I'm not an overprotective parent. He then asked me what had made me ask him that. And I just said very briefly that my husband had suggested it. And we'd had a bit of a fight. He proceeded to ask, "But I thought you two were good. Didn't you just go on that romantic trip to Europe a couple months ago?" I was very confused and asked if he meant the work trip my husband took. He said no, it was definitely a romantic trip. He'd seen some of the romantic-looking bookings himself in passing on my husband's phone, and was, of course, just assuming it was for us. Which, of course, we now both realized it wasn't, and something was odd. Because why would my husband lie about it to me? I called my husband's office right then, and they confirmed there was no official work trip. After hearing how the last argument went, my husband's friend offered to come along for support, which I agreed to. So my husband got home tonight. I confronted him, and he got so mad that the truth came out. He went with a female colleague who he has been seeing for the last few months. He said it was easy with her because she was so uncomplicated compared to me, didn't require anything from him, and always made time for him since there wasn't any kid in the way, and that she was more of a woman than I'd ever been. Worse, that he regretted marrying me, that he wasted his time trying to fix me, and that the SX wasn't worth what he'd gotten back, now being tied down to me because of our son. I think if the friend hadn't been there, it would have gotten physical. I was so scared because I've never seen him like this. So now here we are. I didn't leave, since Reddit roasted me so hard last time, and told me last time that the disruption of taking him away wasn't healthy for my son. But I did ask my husband to leave, which he did after his friend backed me up. I think he was pretty upset too, just that his supposed best friend sided with me over him. I don't think our marriage can survive not just the cheating, but also his cruel words afterwards. He clearly doesn't love me anymore, maybe never loved me. I want to divorce him, but I don't think I can. My husband has threatened that if I move towards divorce, he will file for full custody of our son. I don't have any money of my own to fight him, and I'm not sure if my mom can afford to pitch in very much either. Wibta for leaving my husband, even at the risk of losing my son. I want to do what's best for him. The hard truth is that even with his flaws, my husband is able to provide much better for my son financially than I am right now. I am taking steps towards getting a job and housing, but don't know if it will be enough. Should I just stay with him after everything that's happened? Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.